Hi, I'm Melissa Bensouda. I am a home hemo nocturnal dialysis patient. I've been on dialysis for a total of about 15 years, and I did have a transplant that rejected about a year ago.
I'm Nancy Post. I have a kidney transplant from a deceased donor, and this August 30th will be 30 years for my kidney transplant, so it has lasted a long time. I was diagnosed at 9 years old with lupus, and at age 32, my kidneys failed very suddenly, and so I spent about 4 months on hemodialysis and then switched to peritoneal because of my wanting to get back to work, and was on the list for 16 months before receiving my life-changing transplant.
I'm Tameka Lucas, and I was diagnosed 16 years with lupus. I have done peritoneal, in-center hemo, and I recently got a kidney transplant in December the 2nd of 2017.
Kendrick Breckenridge. I have been a kidney patient for the past 5 years. I originally was on hemodialysis. I had a problem that caused me to get my finger amputated, so I had to move to peritoneal, and so I've been on peritoneal for pretty much the last 4 years, and doing well with that.
I'm Laurie Hines, and I'm a living kidney donor. I donated a kidney on behalf of my husband about 2 years ago. I didn't match him, and so we went through the kidney pairs exchange. My kidney went to Minnesota, and he got a very healthy kidney from New York, and we're both doing wonderfully.
So in terms of who made me aware of my kidney disease, it was my primary care physician. I was 26 years old at the time. I was pretty devastated because I had never really had any health issues, and I ended up pretty much in stage 4 kidney disease just from them taking a urine sample. So I was pretty devastated by that news.
When my kidneys failed, they had put me in the hospital because they didn't know what was happening with me. I'd just been in 2 weeks before to the doctor for a lupus check, and everything seemed to be fine. And so then 2 weeks later, I started having problems, and so I was in the hospital, and they ran a bunch of tests, and they came back that afternoon and said, "We don't know what's going on, but right now your kidneys are not functioning at all." And I was pretty sick with all the impurities in me, and I really didn't grasp that concept. And a few weeks later then, as I was getting better, as I was in the hospital then for a month, and checked at the end of a month, and still there was no function. So then they had to declare that I actually had kidney failure. And I didn't understand what that meant. I just thought, because of the lupus, I just thought, oh, they give you some pills and it'll make you better. And then I finally grasped then what this was going to mean, but I just said a prayer to God, and I said, I've got a long hill to climb, and I'm going to be able to do this. So I had to keep a positive attitude.
Kidney failure for me, it was one of my doctors that I saw when I was a child. And just telling her my symptoms were something that she just knew right away. I had went through 8 months of issues, I would call it. And I didn't understand it. And everybody thought I was just being lazy and it was just all in my head. But I knew something was wrong with me. And so I kept checking, and they eventually sent me to a doctor that did a kidney biopsy. And that's when they said, your kidneys are failing. And I swelled up to like 200 and something pounds without a Prograf that they was giving me, and prednisone. And yeah, it was a really bad experience. And similar to Nancy, I had no idea what kidney failure was, what lupus was, none of that. And so I felt pretty bad because I didn't really understand it and grasp what it meant. But after a while, I started researching, asking more questions, and I finally got it.
Well, for me, I had an aggressive prednisone treatment to deal with hearing loss, and I had an acute kidney injury from that. I had allowed my diabetes to get out of control when my insurance had lapsed, so I wasn't getting the medication and things that I should have been, doing. So it's kind of one of those things. Kind of had that out of sight, out of mind approach, and so my kidneys were, unbeknownst to me, getting worse and worse as I wasn't dealing with my diabetes. And so when I had the acute injury, I had, basically no kidney function left. Went to the hospital and, was told I had to go on dialysis immediately. And so that was kind of the jarring beginning for me, and it was kind of a right away thing.
So my biggest challenges with kidney disease, I'd say a lot of it's emotional for me right now. Just having that fear of not knowing how long I'll live, and granted, none of us really know how long we'll live. But just knowing that you have a higher probability of not being around as long as other people. And the other part of it was, just the fear of not being able to provide for my family. At the time I was diagnosed, I had two toddlers and a teenager, and I was very afraid that I wouldn't be able to work and I wouldn't be able to see them through school and graduate from college. So I'd say a lot of my largest challenges were emotional, or have been emotional.
Yeah, having a transplant, I think things are, although in the back of my mind, even being as far out as I am, I think there's always a little bit when I go in 4 times a year for lab work and see the doctor twice a year. But each time I go in for lab work and I wait for the results to come back, I still kind of worry, like, am I still going to be? And 2 months ago, I was in for my last lab work, and my creatinine was still, after almost 30 years, 1.1, and my BUN was 26. So that's pretty darn good, So, but it's something that always, I think, most people will stick with you. I know there were definitely more concerns while I was on dialysis. I wondered what it was, and with the different things that you went through on dialysis and trying to go and staying with the diet and everything, and things were less reassuring. And it wasn't, but once I got the transplant and I was able to get back to my job full time and I could provide and do things like that, the assurance level and everything became more comfortable for me.
I think the most challenging thing for me was once after I was diagnosed, I figured that lupus was getting ready to be a death sentence for me. So having to explain that to my kids at the time, my youngest daughter being 8 and my oldest was 10, having to go back and explain that, was kind of scary, because I had to watch for my emotions, watch for their emotions, and eventually I got to a point where I was feeling weaker and not being able to get out the bed, so I couldn't interact with them. We couldn't do a lot of the stuff that they wanted to do because I was just way too tired to do them. I eventually ended up, just seemed like I was ordering everything because I just couldn't stand in the kitchen for a long time. The kitchen getting hot, and it wasn't working out for me. So I think I lived in fear for a long time. And then when I had to do emergency dialysis, just like woke up one day and all these things was connected to me. I had no clear understanding. Nobody told me anything. So I had a great fear of what could possibly happen to me. And one of my first years doing dialysis, somebody had passed away, and it scared me even more. I was like, my God, am I going to make it out of this place? Still being able to walk and breathe and talk and things like that. So it was really a scary thing for me.
Well, it's an odd thing to say, but I think as a pastor, I have to have a level of faith that not only is sufficient for my life, but to set an example for other people that are attached to me and with whom I come in contact. And for me, this is one of the more challenging things to that faith. And sometimes it gets hard to believe that a transplant is coming, that you're not just waiting in vain. And then there are other things for which I'm waiting. I'm engaged to be married, and so sometimes it kind of makes things that aren't here right now seem like they're not really going to come to pass, and that I'm standing in faith because standing in faith is what I do, not because there's going to eventually be a reward. And so I have to like really revisit that and really check myself and make sure that I believe the things that I believe and that they're actually going to come to pass, because sometimes honestly it's a deal where it just seems like I'm just waiting for the sake of waiting. So
I handled dietary restrictions fairly well. It was actually one of several reasons that I chose to do home hemodialysis and to take that a step further, even nocturnal dialysis. So I've been able to, I dialyze for 8 hours every night, well, every other night rather, and I'm pretty much have low potassium, low phosphorus, so I'm able to eat as freely as I want. Which I think has been one of the keys to my survival over the past several years.
I think as I look back of when I was on dialysis, I kept a diary every day of what I ate. So it kept me more on track of how I was doing, so I could keep within the parameters of what I needed to do so I would stay healthy. Because when I would come in once a month for checkups while I was on dialysis, I would see other people who come in who weren't keeping their, taking care of their fluid, how much they took in every day, or they were eating too much stuff with potassium or whatever. And so they'd have to make different changes in the dietitian. And I saw that they didn't feel as well. And I thought, I want to feel well, so I'm going to stick with what the program says. It's kind of like playing a game. You know what the rules are, and the more that you stick with the rules and educate yourself all the time, you'll learn more and more about what you're dealing with. And the better educated you are, the easier it will be on you, and the healthier you'll be, and the happier you will be.
Dietary restrictions was not my friend at all. It meant giving up so much stuff that I really liked. All the cheesiness. I am a big, authentic Mexican type of food person. So not being able to eat macaroni and oh my gosh, I was dying. I felt like I couldn't eat this, I couldn't eat that. I was a big Pepsi person, and I couldn't drink Pepsi, and it was so hard for me. It was really hard for me. And then I ended up having heart problems because I started having a narrowing in one of my arteries. And so I had open heart surgery, and I was like, you better change something really quick. So I started slowing down on stuff, and then I would have macaroni on Christmas and Thanksgiving. Those were my treat times. And so, yeah, but it was really, really hard in the beginning.
well, for me, I've been a diabetic since '94, so dietary restrictions, having discipline, and that sort of thing. To me, I looked at that as the reason why I had diabetes in the first place. So, it's a deal that I was building toward, and so it just added something, some new restrictions. So it was just one more thing. And I think that one thing that I discovered with diabetes when I initially was told I was diabetic, I had a how can I say this in a PC way? I had a nutritionist that was inexperienced, we'll say. And so she told me, you can never have sugar again. And then when I found out that she didn't know what in the world she was talking about, that, it was really more about carbs than about sugar anyway, so you needed to decrease sugar. Yes, you did, but you didn't have to eliminate it. And that you had to watch where. And so if you had something, that was dessert oriented, that you had to make these concessions, you had to give up something over here. It made it more enjoyable for me. So I was very picky where I enjoyed desserts. And so when I moved over to having to incorporate the kidney diet in addition to the diabetic diet, then I had to make some other concessions, and it was a little difficult, initially. Like Tameka said, I'm a cheese person, so I have times when I enjoy it, and make sure I take my binders and that sort of thing. So not something that's fun to do. It's not a diet that you want to throw a party and invite all your friends to with the food. But
Yeah.
It's I just look at it as one of the things that we have to do, and so there's good food, and then there's life, and life is a little bit more important. So make the concessions that you have to make.
I never really understood the Medicare process when I was first diagnosed. So, one of the things I experienced was being overwhelmed with paperwork and explanations and signing things when I was first diagnosed. So, at the time I did work and I had private insurance, and I didn't know enough to understand that I could keep my private insurance for up to 33 months or so. And so I didn't try to focus a lot on learning about Medicare, but I was informed about it, absolutely.
They talked to me about Medicare the month after I was on dialysis, that's when they declared that I actually had kidney failure, so they had backed it up a month. But it was very confusing, and I think it's still very confusing to this day. It can be very overwhelming for people, and so I suggest that if you can work with someone at your doctor, a social worker, or someone there in your connection with that can help you to better understand it, because it can be kind of complicated. It's not something the typical person's going to understand, and they consistently keep changing it. So.
Well, getting to understand Medicare for me, I work with some great social workers in the hospital, outside the hospital. So they just came in with a stack of papers and was like, here, we need you to sign this so that you can, have your hospital bills and medication and this and that. And I still never understood the difference between Part A, Part B, Part D. And I was like, okay, yeah, if you say so, I'll go ahead and agree to this, but we're going to talk more about it, But yeah, it was so confusing. It's just so much you need to know and understand about it, and what it will pay for, what it won't pay for. Even now after my transplant, there are certain things that it won't pay for. So I've had to find other ways to get, some of my medications paid for. But again, my social worker did that for me. So I worked with some great people before transplant and after transplant. So
typically, I think it's good to be a down-to-earth person, but maybe this is the one time when I'll act like I'm rich, and so I have people for that. But seriously, the social worker at my dialysis clinic is the reason why all of that is taken care of, and I'm a person, I like to know why things work and how they work and that sort of thing. Typically, I will not, have to repent later because I lied on camera and said that I understand what's going on with Medicare. It's the one thing in my life that I have no clue about. I take the mail out and I look at it, as though I really know what in the world I'm looking at. I do not. And so I'm not even embarrassed to say that it's so ridiculous with some of the things that when I've seen some of the bills for what they say that my dialysis was costing, I'm okay, and you understand why our national deficit is what it is if we're paying that a month for dialysis, and so maybe I'm in the wrong racket when everything turns around. Maybe I should open a dialysis center.
So from the initial meeting with the nephrologist, so I was transferred from my primary care doctor, and from my initial meeting with my nephrologist, I met with a social worker, a dietitian, I toured the transplant center. So I feel like I was very blessed to understand about transplant, to also understand about dialysis, hemodialysis, and peritoneal dialysis. So I was fairly well educated in advance. All of those options didn't necessarily fit my lifestyle at the time that I was diagnosed, but I felt like I was educated very well by my nephrologist and transplant center, or dialysis center rather.
Yeah, I remember it was talking to my nephrologist when I was in for an appointment because my kidney failure was sudden. I had a subclavian in here, so that was a lovely little attachment in my neck. And after 3 months, my chemistry was good, and so they said we're either going to have to put, a graft in your arm or in your leg or something for you to continue hemo, or there's another type of dialysis which is called peritoneal. And they explained that to me, and I thought, hey, I can do that at home and everything, and I think that would go better with my job. And so I switched to that, and then once I got settled on that and back to work, then the doctor said to me, he says, it doesn't seem that lupus affects a transplanted kidney. And he said, once you have one good kidney inside of you again, you won't have to hook up to a dialysis machine. So I thought, it sounds like a pretty good deal. So I went on the waiting list, and I was actually on the waiting list for 16 months and then received my transplant. And so, and the dialysis unit at that time at our hospital was there in the hospital, and the different modes of dialysis, and then of course then the transplant clinic was there. So everything was all in the same building on the same floor, so it was very easy access to and see and actually sit waiting for doctor's appointments, talking with other patients that were either heading off to dialysis or waiting for an appointment to see the doctor after transplantation. So you had a lot of support from other patients.
Understanding transplant in the beginning, I really didn't. I'm not going to say I did. It was just so much information, and because I felt like I was just thrown into dialysis immediately, I didn't know what my, real options were. But when I first explained to my dad and my stepmom that I had needed a kidney, my stepmother started testing from the moment I said something. So for that first year that I was testing and things like that, she was testing. And so after the end of my first year of doing dialysis, I had a transplant from my stepmother. But it ended up rejecting like 5 years later. And so I felt like going to tell people that, I need a kidney, it was like, what would they be thinking of me to be asking for a body part? And, it was a weird kind of a, conversation when you would approach other people, about it. And so when they were telling me about the peritoneal and the fistula in the arm, I had seen people with the fistula and it looked like the little snake something. I was like, oh, I don't want that in my arm. I wear too many short sleeves. I was like, that doesn't work for me, And then when I was introduced to the peritoneal, I was like, oh, this is so unattractive. You got this. And it was just weird for me all the way around. So it didn't matter what I chose. It just still felt like it was an awkward thing for me. So I don't know.
Well, from the beginning, I think that the option of transplant was explained sufficiently. As I said earlier, as far as starting on hemodialysis, it was something I was just thrown into. It wasn't presented as an option. This is what you have to do. And when peritoneal was I was initially exposed to that. I was given the option of it or having it explained to me, but it was being explained after a session of hemodialysis. So I remember my blood pressure was low that day. I was kind of wiped out. I was hearing her, but I wasn't. And so all I heard was there was this possibility of infection, and it was a pretty substantial thing. And so I stopped hearing after that, and I don't need another problem. And so I didn't really get the option. One reason that I enjoy going and being part of the classrooms, and they have the patients in the classrooms now. Prior to being on dialysis, I enjoy being part of that because I think that as much as possible, if people can really know the truth about the options that they have, it'll be a different experience than I had. And so I think that I was pretty much pushed into peritoneal dialysis because of the experience I had with my hand, and they didn't want to do the same thing with my other arm, so it wasn't really an option. But I think that if I was fully aware of the options that both presented, that peritoneal would have easily been the one that I would have chosen. I think that it is gentler on your body, so I just think that if I was aware, then that's the one that I would have chosen. And so I don't think that it was something that I really was aware of my options. And I think that that is part of the reason why now I feel led to help people in that capacity.
So from my perspective and experience, I don't think all of the transplant options are laid out clearly and cleanly for people. I suspect some transplant centers do it better than others, but I think there are many that do not explain all of the options. I found out about pairs donation and the exchange on my own through research and looking on the internet. I had not really heard about high-risk deceased donors. I'm not sure that would have been an option that we would have selected, but I think it's really important that we know all of the menu of options for transplant. Some are relevant, some are not relevant, but to at least know the wide array. We also didn't know that we could get multi-listed, that we could get listed at different transplant centers. While that's an investment of time and money, it's also really important to at least have that as an option. So I don't think there's one place that easily, clearly, concisely lays out all of the transplant options. And I would say as a living donor, I was in the hospital 2 nights and 3 days. It was, I thought, an incredibly easy surgery in the sense of recovery. My husband and I obviously were recovering at the same time. I feel great. I don't have any residual problems at all. I think my one kidney's doing just fine by itself. And I would highly recommend people talk to loved ones, family members, friends, and if they don't match you, that if they're willing to give a kidney, the way I look at it is I saved the life of a woman in Minnesota and I saved my husband's life. So it sort of doubled the pleasure for me.
So I know my experience, and I'm very passionate about transplant. It's been a very long journey for me. So I was on the transplant list for almost 9 years. And as you mentioned, you kind of run out of, I won't say hope, but at some point you just kind of wonder, how long am I going to wait? I was nearly 5 years into the transplant list when I asked my transplant center, is there something we can do? So I had about 98% antibodies because of previous blood transfusions, and so my wait was a lot longer. But I just didn't know if anything else could be done. I hadn't seen other people in my dialysis center wait the length of time that I had waited. So there was mention of trying the IVIG process, which didn't do too much for me, but it was another case where I was asking and not necessarily being told, here are some options. When I finally got the transplant, it did reject immediately, actually, and then started kicking in about 6 months later. So following the final rejection of the transplant, I decided to do things a little bit differently. I felt a lot more empowered, primarily because I had networked and done a lot of advocacy in Washington, D.C., and learned a lot about what other patients had done. And I learned that multi-listing really was a thing. So I'd heard that briefly, I think, when I got on the transplant list, but it was more like, here's the last sheet in a packet that you're filling out. You can multi-list, you need to assign this, but it wasn't really explaining how that was beneficial for a person with high antibodies. And so this time around, I did things differently. I'm actually listed at 2 different hospitals, one of which is in Baltimore, so a little ways away. But they've given me options such as doing A2 testing, which allows me as a B negative blood type to be tested for a person with an A blood type. And then also, encouraging the multi-listing, which was very important, and the paired exchange, making that a reality. So I've done things a lot different than I did before, and a lot of that came from education and speaking with other patients.
I think you just take a day at a time, and you need to keep yourself busy every day in what you're doing, keep up with all the requirements of whatever type of dialysis that you're on, continue to do with that, and be the healthiest that you can be, so when the time does come for the call to come, that you will physically be able to have the transplant, that you won't be sick and you'll have to be passed up then. So you still have to try to live your life on and wait. Don't dwell on it and just think, think that you just need to keep living in the meantime.
I still am, though, such a warrior. And so I let everything kind of play on my emotions, and none of it was ever really easy. Uh, mm, mm. It was never really easy. um, it was, again, like I said, this whole feeling like a death sentence type of thing, and explaining stuff to your kids. It was, I don't know, it was really hard. And then when I was told about the antibodies being too high and it'd be hard to find a match, I felt defeated. I have a friend that is on this panel along with me that made it a lot easier to get through some of that, because a lot of times I kept feeling like I was losing faith. I had lost my faith. But he stood by me for the last 13 years to help get me through a lot of this. And when he started, he had questions for me, I had questions for him. It was just, a big support thing. So it's always good to have somebody you can lean on and find out their experience. And I think that's why I enjoy doing this so much and talking to others and sharing my testimony, because I know a lot of stuff didn't get answered for me, but through my experience, I know now I can answer questions for someone else that did not know, that does not know. And so whenever I have opportunities like this, I welcome them, because it only helps me and encourage me even now, because I still struggle through moments that, because now I'm having grandbabies, and it's like, it's still kind of scary for me. But that parent exchange thing, I went through 15 years, and last year was the first time I ever heard of a parent exchange. It was like, why nobody told me that long time ago, So, but I don't know. It's hard.
For me, as far as motivation, I think of opportunities in life that had nothing to do with this, but bad choices caused me to miss out on things that would have been available to me. And the last thing that I want to happen is a kidney becomes available and I'm not prepared. I've not done other things I needed to do. I've not eaten right. I've messed up on my medicine. I've gotten behind on my fluid and all this kind of thing. So it kind of goes back to that old saying that good luck is when opportunity meets preparation, and so you're prepared, and when an opportunity comes along, you're able to get right in there. And so if I do the things I'm supposed to do, if I'm compliant, then there shouldn't be any reason why when the kidney comes, I'm ready for it. And so things I don't want to do, I go ahead and do. I'm not a morning person, but I try to make sure I do the things I'm supposed to do. Take my medicine in the morning, not take it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So sometimes, I'll get up and do the things I need to do, only because I don't want anybody to be able to say you can't have this because you didn't do what you were supposed to do.
My family and friends have been really my armor of protection throughout this entire journey for it'll be close to 20 years, more or less. And I'm grateful that I've chosen such amazing friends and extended family, because it's those moments when you feel like you really can't go on any further. So whether it's, as I was working, or I work full time and I'm taking care of children and I'm doing my own dialysis, I'm exhausted at the end of the day. And I have friends who have continued to keep me motivated and encourage me. My family has been extremely supportive, from things like making sure my children have something for dinner if I'm too tired to cook or too tired to go to buy them something to eat. Making sure that I've got an opportunity to still travel, because I travel quite a bit with my job, so they take on that additional responsibility of checking in on my children. So without my friends and my family, I'm not really sure where I would be emotionally, and I'm not sure that I'd still be able to work full time. So I'm very grateful for them.
Yeah, your family and your friends are most important in your success and trying to help you through the tough times and the good times too. And if you don't have family in town that can help and support you, then you need to, continue to reach out to your friends and keep a good network of friends, so then they become your family. And the support that you need, you don't want to have to go through this alone. And most people don't. So it's having someone there, to different people that that will help you, is most important.
The support in the beginning, I don't feel like I had that from family or friends. Again, because I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to explain it to somebody else. And they'd look at you and say, well, you look good, but for me, I feel like lupus sometimes is that invisible disease, stuff that we feel, but you can't see it. So we always look good to you, and no matter what. But on the inside, we feeling terrible, just tired and weak, not feeling well, that kind of thing. And I think because a lot of my family just didn't understand it, I'm the first person with lupus. I've never even heard of lupus. But because, there was not a great understanding of it, people didn't really know how to respond. I lost a lot of friends. I made a few friends. And then some of the friends that I have, I talk to maybe once or twice, maybe 3 times out the year. And it's just like I've become alienated, from people. And so my support level at the time was non-existent. I have people that pray for me from a distance. Not really many people help come to like my appointments to try to understand. We get ready to go back to this one right here. But when I go to the hospital, he's at the hospital. He was like always there. He prayed for me. He made sure I was covered. It was, great stumbling upon him. So, and then when I started joining different groups on social media, that kind of helped too, because you knew there was somebody else out there that was going through what you were going through, and that probably was going through it longer, and so they could better understand, some of the things that you were dealing with emotionally, physically, and, things like that. So it's kind of different now, and people are starting to understand my struggle and what I was going through. But at this point, I pray about everything, even the smallest thing. It's just like, God, please just help me through this one, please, And so encouragement, I think, from others is what keeps me going.
Well, as far as family support, I think that for me, it's kind of depends. I think day to day, not a lot of support, but that's a lot and due to the way that I do things. I'm not a complainer. I don't. Uh, I mean, even when I go to the doctor and they say, "Well, tell me about your pain." Well, you mean the pain that I have every day that I don't really count, or you talking about strap pain? So because I don't really talk about what I'm dealing with a lot, uh, uh, that there isn't a tendency, for them to really move into action. Now, uh, a couple of months ago, I know this isn't kidney related, but I had a low blood sugar episode where I was just out of my head, and uh, they looked in on me, and I was really just like out of it. I had fallen out of the bed. I mean, the whole thing. And as I was coming back around, my little nieces were there. My mom was there. My brother, his voice was like my connection to sanity. My sister was there giving me juice. Uh, they were, so when stuff like that happens, or when I go in the hospital, sometimes it's a little embarrassing because we have like we're having a family reunion. But in those times, you really get to see that you are really supported, and so I never feel like I'm by myself. And another thing, Tameka talked about our connection, but one thing she doesn't know is like a lot of times the her knowing that the route that I was about to take, and kind of being able to talk to me about some of those things for me was really helpful, because the thing is, a lot of the people in my family have no idea what I face. And so if I'm not educating them, then they're ignorant to what I have to deal with. And so she was the one person in my life that knew what I had to deal with and what I was going to be facing. And so even though we weren't around each other as much when I was going through my stuff, just her telling me some of this stuff and kind of alerting me to what I was going to face really helped me because the fact of the matter is, it is daunting and it is kind of scary, So being able to know that stuff really was helpful for me.
So I would say for any living donors out there, my family was not thrilled when I said I was going to go through this, but I will say now that they've seen afterwards and when now they're very alert to the stories, the wonderful stories that are told in the media about living donation. Now there are a number of them that want to be donors, anonymous donors. The other thing I would say is my employer gave me 30 days of paid leave. So while that's not a huge motivator, it's a great bonus to be able to have time off work to recover and just revel in being taken care of. So I would encourage anybody who's thinking about living donation to look into it and also talk to their employer. Most employers are thrilled to have somebody be an organ donor.
Sure. So I'll show my fistula. I'll start out by saying I had an amazing surgeon because I've had this fistula since 2002. I consider myself very fortunate. So it still works even after having a transplant for 4 years. It started out, you can even see the line where the surgery took place. So it started out very small, and you can see it's gotten fairly large, but I've got really good blood flow. But I want to make a comment to what you said, Tameka, about just the image of having a fistula. I don't even know that I'm at the point yet where I'm comfortable just wearing short sleeves and being out in the open. So I have my days. But, some of the comments that I've heard just in grocery stores or at the gas station of, what is that thing? People are not necessarily aware and conscious of what comes with kidney disease or, things that don't look like the norm. So it's been very devastating for me, just, I won't say emotionally, but just cosmetically having this. But at the same time, it is very much been my lifeline. So it kind of is what it is, but it's a pretty large size vein. And I've got really good blood flow. It's pretty curvy, so I'm very careful of where I stick my needles, but it's kept me alive for sure. And I put my needles in myself. So this has been going on. So I started my own dialysis at home in 2003. So I've been sticking my own needles since 2003, off and on. And people say, is it scary? And I'm like, I guess it could be, but at some point I just kind of tricked my mind into this is just what I have to do, and it doesn't really faze me too much anymore.
I wasn't on hemo long enough to have a fistula, so I don't have anything to share.
When I first saw that, and I'm glad you brought that back to me, because when I first saw that, it was before I even started dialysis and knew what dialysis was, any of that. And I just saw a lady come in a grocery store one day, and I was like, wow, she had a bad injury. And I thought something just may have happened to her. I never associated it with dialysis until I was a dialysis patient. And then I saw other people with it, and I was like, is that what that lady had, all that time ago, And so, but still for me, I've always been a short sleeve type of person. And I know this sounds crazy, but I am like kind of claustrophobic, and wearing sleeves that are too long just kind of bothers me mentally. I know that sounds weird. So I would always just layer up, but under it all, I always had on a short, sleeve type of shirt. So I was always leery of, scars and that kind of thing on my arm. But I've had a fistula and a graft, and when people see it on me, it's the conversation piece. When I first got my fistula, my baby sister would always listen to my arm because of the thrill and the brew, and she's like, "Oh, your arm sound like a hula hoop or a washing machine," and so she would listen to it all the time, and she was like, "Okay, you sound good." So and for me, it was like at first it was annoying, but then it helped me to sleep because as long as I heard it, I knew I was okay, and I started looking at it as my lifeline as well. And then I have a 5-year-old granddaughter. She listens to my arm. She gently touches my arm. She feels the heartbeat and that kind of thing. And she always makes sure I'm okay, and she know I'm okay if she can feel my arm. So it's all been a weird experience, but a great experience at the same time.
Well, I had the fistula in long enough to basically mess up my hand, but I don't really have the typical fistula look. So you can tell that there was something there, but that's it. So, but I have other things that are other war wounds that from having that. So I don't have a finger or and then I have a kind of like a straw that's put in here because I had a Steele syndrome. So and it basically was shrinking my finger because I wasn't getting blood flow. And so when they put the little straw deal in here to increase the blood flow, the finger grew back out, busted out of the skin, became gangrenous, and so. But hey, I was gonna have to lose half my hand, so I only ended up losing the one finger. So I'll probably never play saxophone again. But there are worse things.
I ended up switching to peritoneal because it was an easier mode of dialysis for me in connection with my job. I worked at Hallmark as an artist for years, and I wanted to get back to my job 5 days a week. And I admit I wasn't too thrilled about having an access in my arm. So I switched to the peritoneal then. And I found that it was very easy to take care of. It is something that you have to take care of daily and make sure that the exit site stays clean. But other than that, and there were less food restrictions on peritoneal as compared to hemodialysis. So, and from starting peritoneal way back when, almost 30 years ago, to the improvements that they have made over the years that we were talking about before, his little night machine that he has for his peritoneal now. 31 years ago, I tried the home night dialysis, and the size of the machine was the equivalent of a 36-inch or 26-inch Samsonite suitcase on wheels. It was huge, and now it's a very small, compact, computerized thing. So it has come a long way and much improved. So I think it's just a choice of what mode of dialysis is going to work best for you.
I did peritoneal dialysis. And at first, I just thought of it as a form of freedom away from restrictions and having to go to the center. It felt like all the time. It was like a home away from home kind of thing. And so I just saw it as a more of a freedom type thing and being in the comfort of your own home, So, man, I didn't really think about I'm going to say not so sexy look. I didn't think about that at the time. And so I did it for 3 years though, but then it stopped working for me. I probably would have continued, but like I said, it stopped working for me. I started having back issues because of carrying the fluid. I was getting tired more than just being at the center. Although I was able to do it longer, it just felt like it was just too much on me. And after, in the 3 years that I actually did peritoneal, I only had one infection, and that infection just kind of just threw me right out of it, because then I felt like I was starting over with the whole diagnosis with lupus, not being able to eat, the constant vomiting and nausea and that type of thing. And so I was like, it was not working for me anymore. So I had to go back to in-center hemo. So that was pretty much my experience.
Well, honestly, I had a predisposition against peritoneal initially because I helped someone that was on peritoneal move from one apartment to another, and I think it was the day after delivery, and moving all of those boxes, it's like, I don't want that in my house. So that was the first thing. And so, like, right now, my dining room is the staging area. We can't eat on a table anymore. It's just a staging area for my peritoneal dialysis, all of my supplies and all the fluid. It's under, on top of, around my dining room table. So my whole dining room is just the staging area. But again, no comparison for me. By far, my preference is peritoneal dialysis. And then when I was on hemodialysis, of course, I had to avoid phosphorus. I had to avoid what's the other one? Potassium.
Potassium, yeah.
And so they said, well, all those things we told you not to eat as far as potassium, we want you to eat it now. So I get to have bananas again. I get to have potatoes again. Man, so when you have to cut back, and they tell you can have something, we want you to add this on. Not a problem. Not a problem at all. And so I have no problem eating bananas or potatoes. So that was a good thing. And then also, like I said, those 3 days that I was on dialysis, when I was in center, I always felt wiped out afterward. And then as a pastor, my Sunday was full. So Sunday is full. Monday I'm wiped out. Wednesday I'm wiped out. Friday I'm wiped out. Saturday I'm trying to do all the things I couldn't do on those days. And then I had all of my appointments on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, when am I supposed to work? And so as a man, it really was hard for me. And so now I'm able, being an entrepreneur, I'm able to do the things that I couldn't do when I was on hemodialysis. And so, it really, helps me get back to, feeling like I can do the things I need to do. And then, I don't think that I could have gotten married or things like that if I was still doing that. It's not something that to me, hemodialysis didn't afford me the opportunity to expand my life. It just seemed like it took things away. And so now that I'm on peritoneal, I feel like I can recapture some of the things that were extracted from my life.
So if I had one recommendation, maybe two, for people who are newly diagnosed with kidney disease, it would be to be your best advocate. So, I kind of have a little bit of a controlling personality, I guess you could say, or independent personality, but that's gotten me through. I can't think of the number of times I've been in the hospital and seen other patients who didn't know their lab numbers, they didn't know what medications they took, they just knew they took a blue pill in the morning and maybe a red pill in the afternoon. And, when you get into an urgent situation, not knowing those things works against you. Being able to articulate any allergies that you have and explaining that you've got a fistula in your left forearm, those things, are a matter of life and death. And it's important because nephrologists, nurses, social workers have so many patients that they see. It's important for us as patients to be able to describe how we're feeling and keep track of our own health.
I think if I'm going to be talking to someone who was diagnosed with kidney disease, I'd want them first of all to understand that it does not have to be a death sentence. That there is life with kidney failure, and that the important thing is education, is for you to learn. First of all, you want to get information, which usually typically the social workers or the people at the dialysis can give you written information or tell you places to go on the internet to find information. You want to read through that information, and then as you start to learn these things, ask questions. And there are no dumb questions. If you have something wrong, you need an answer to that question. And you may think it's dumb, but it could be very, very important to your health. So it is not a dumb question. It is a smart question. So continue, I still, after all these years, continue to learn more stuff. I work with a lot of patients here in town. I work with the children who imagine having kidney failure as a child. And I go to a camp in the summer to work with kids here who have kidney failure. So I try to keep up on the latest stuff so I can continue to work with patients who find out that they're going to be heading towards kidney failure. Learn about the different types of dialysis. Some may be, we've all talked about different things and how each one have worked better for us. Different ones work better for different people. Again, education, learning what works best for you. Learning about your medications and what food, and learning about if a transplant is an option and how to go through that. It all comes down to you making an investment in yourself, of you wanting to learn and to be able to live the healthiest life of what you're dealing with. So continue to press on forward and find other people as we help and support other people at different points in kidney failure. And that, as we've talked about, it helps as much of us now as we have gone on and working with other patients as helping as someone who's asking the question. So be a part of that community. That is going to be part of your community now, and broaden your family.
I really like that. But some of the things that I do to encourage people, I have run into people on the different social media sites for the stuff that I do. I work with MOKP, NKF, I'm a mentor, ambassador, and I'm a part of all these social media groups. And, I can't stress enough, now that I've really learned how to do it myself, is to stand strong, stand on faith, research, ask all the questions that you can possibly ask. I've talked to people who were suicidal. I've gotten them to change their mind. It's just, and you feel blessed to be a blessing to somebody else, because you were able to help them, encourage them, make them feel better about the situation that they're going through. And so I myself really enjoy talking to people and helping people and, all of that. I have people that specifically call the foundation to ask for me to call them back, because we've talked in the past, or they found me on some social media site or something like that. And so, because they reach out to me personally, I feel more encouraged that, I'm saying something right, that they understand, that they can relate to. And I used to tell people that, sometimes doctors read about stuff, they research stuff, but they don't know it internally because they don't live it. They don't feel it. They don't breathe it. They don't, that kind of thing. And so I think sometimes some of the best advice comes from somebody who is actually living and doing and having to restrict from so much different things, And so, again, stand on our faith, staying encouraged. Research. Because I research still, even my pills, I'll be like, I feel a certain way. Which one of these pills is making me do that? And I will go through my whole pill selection. my morning meds, my morning breakfast, or whatever you want to call it, and I look and I see which one could possibly be making me feel that way, and then I'll call my doctor and I'm like, hey, this is what I feel, and I think it's this, and then he'll say, I think you're right, So it never hurts to ask a question, because like she said, no question is ever a dumb question.
Well, I think the thing that I would tell a person that is going to take this journey is to identify a care partner. And one of the things that I struggle with the most is when I have to do things by myself. And uh, I don't care if you are trying to lose weight, going to the gym, anything that you do, it's always easier to do with a partner. Prayer is easier when you have a partner. So when you identify a care partner, and of course it's easier if you're married, having that spouse to do that. But even sometimes you may not have a spouse that's supportive, and so if that's your situation, figure out who that care partner is going to be. Make sure that they're educated when you're educated. When you find things out, discuss it with them. Take this journey with someone, and find that it's always the fact is two is better than one. So have a person that doesn't mind going to your appointments, that will do things with you, that will discuss things with you when maybe sometimes. If they get trained when you get trained, that'll, if you get to the point where you have to go on dialysis, if you're doing a home thing, that will know how to set up your stuff. So when you're tired and you're wiped out, maybe when you come home, your stuff is already set up, and you don't have to, say, okay, now I have to do this, because, there are times where, frankly, I start setting up and I say, well, I'm going to sit down for a second, and I fall asleep and I start my dialysis, super late. And so now my next day is tied up because, I have to, be there later because my dialysis is 9.5 hours. So, if I had if I was already married and my wife was there, then, there would be times when I could come home and my stuff would already be set up. And so, identifying that care partner, and not taking this journey by yourself is something that I think is a good thing to do.
And can I just add in, on behalf of Transplant, on behalf of living donors, what I would tell somebody is, when the time is right, ask your family, ask your friends, ask your colleagues to be a donor, or at least get tested. Do not deny them the opportunity, just because you're uncomfortable asking. Do not deny them the opportunity to do this thing that will change their quality of life forever. And while 2 may be better than 1 in most circumstances, 2 is the same as 1 in this circumstance when they give up a kidney.
I think you want to be able to tell them that there are several options. There's not just one option. There will be choices for you. The people providing that information need to really share all the options that they know about with them and help the patient along the way, then give them information to help educate them, so then that the patient then can choose the option that they feel is best for their lifestyle. But it's important that you get all the information out and you don't understand it at first. That's true. We've all talked about that. We didn't understand when our kidneys failed what that really meant. It's a whole new world to a person. And so, and not necessarily giving them all the information at once, because that's way too overwhelming. To start giving them, the essentials, what they need at first, and then as they're starting to absorb that, then give them more and add on to it, and not giving them everything at once, because then it's just overwhelming and you just don't know where to go from there.
So, some of that, I feel like that sometimes we're treated as a dollar sign and not a person. And because we are the ones experiencing, sometimes I think that doctors who have a better bedside manner or that takes the time to listen to their patients. I think listening is a big thing. Uh, Mr. Breckenridge here might tell you is the communication, which it is, you know, being able to communicate back and forth. But I think it first starts with listening, not just hearing what they're saying, but really, really listening to what it is that they're dealing with and feeling. So that if you didn't know that yourself, you yourself as a doctor or a nurse could go back and research that, and the next time that patient come in, you would actually have an answer for that person, you know, and then you could carry that on to the next patient that might be thinking of that or didn't have enough thought or thought it could have been one of those crazy questions and didn't want to ask it, and then you know that doctor can still pass that information on as like extra information, hey, you know, by the way, kind of thing. But again, nothing too overwhelming, you know, but giving you all your knowledge and information and, you know, website or whatever it is, because, you know, all of us have said one time or another that we was just thrown into it not knowing, you know, what was really, you know, happening to us and going on, and you know, the Medicare thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I would say moving a little further in the process, I think that there needs to be training on how to ask people to donate a kidney. I'm not uncomfortable talking to people, obviously, with what I do, but I am very uncomfortable asking people to donate a kidney. And so I told my family in one fell swoop, this is what, you know, this is my situation. So if you want to go get tested, here you go. And so the ones that did initially, they did, but I don't know how to go to people and ask for that. I mean, my lot in life is serving people, so I don't really feel comfortable asking people, you know, to do that. So I think that if there was a class where we got to practice, you know, and people said this is how you do it, you know, and there was a way of elevating that comfort level, I think that would be a good thing.
So my wish for, I guess, the medical community is kind of along the lines of what you guys have said, is speaking in basic English. So I know that, I mean, education levels vary, literacy levels vary, but the first thing is our creatinine is high, we got waste in our bodies, so we're not the most mentally alert people all the time, and things can be easily misunderstood because of things being communicated in medical terminology. And I know that's easy to do because that's how medical professionals probably communicate most amongst themselves. But as a patient who may come from different cultural backgrounds or different varying levels of education, may not understand things, and people aren't always comfortable to say, hey, I don't understand this. So I think it's important to have some type of relatable communication form, and also some emotional intelligence, you know, knowing the signs and the cues of when what they're saying doesn't align with what they're doing, and maybe there's something deeper there. I'm not thinking that everyone should be like a psychiatrist, but I think there are various cues that people can pick up on if there's a proper training on things to look for.
You guys are awesome. Yeah, that was